History, it's Howdy with Stevens. What do you mean I messed up? It's my show, how could I possibly mess up? The show's called History with Stevens, right? I'm Stevens, so obviously I'm right. You know, whatever, go to the video. People just want to see a Stevens video anyway, right? So just give them the Stevens video, just go to it. Yes, go to it, I'm not redoing it. No one comes here for the howdy, just go to the video.
Steven.
History with Stevens.
Steven.
This is episode 7 of History with Stevens. This episode is about the American Revolution. The essential question for this chapter is how was the Continental Army able to win the war for independence from Great Britain? Make sure you can answer this question with specific examples by the end of this chapter. The American weaknesses seemed overwhelming at the time. They were vastly outnumbered by the British, and they never had more than 20,000 soldiers listed at one time. To make matters worse, most of them had little or no training and weren't great soldiers. They were also poorly equipped at the time. They had almost no supplies and suffered from shortages on everything, including guns, gunpowder, uniforms, and even food. There were even reports of troops not having shoes during the war. Because of the blockade by Britain, America also went through an economic collapse during this time, making matters much worse. Despite all that, the Americans did have some advantages. They had the motivation to fight for their country's independence. Many of these soldiers were willing to give up their lives in order for America to win its independence, and that perseverance cannot be forgotten. They also received help from overseas. If you remember from previous episodes, the French had previously lost a lot of territory in North America during the French and Indian War. The French wanted to get even and stick it to the British, so they supported the Americans, hoping their rival Britain would lose many of its claims in North America. Lastly, George Washington was a great leader and great military mind, and his leadership proved to be invaluable during the war. At quick glance, the British had some huge advantages. They had over 42,000 soldiers at the beginning of the war, and King George hired 30,000 Hessian troops from an area that would later become Germany. These troops were well trained and well supplied, unlike the Continental Army. The British also convinced loyalists, African Americans, and Native Americans to fight with them. They promised enslaved Africans freedom if they fought with the British Army, and the Native Americans knew the colonists wanted to continue to push the Native Americans off their land while settling westward. However, the British Army did have weaknesses. One of the biggest weaknesses was the distance between North America and Britain. It would take a long time for news to travel from North America back to Europe, and sending ships across the Atlantic got expensive. Again, remember, no Instagram back then. You couldn't just slide into the DMs and let King George know what was happening over in North America. Another weakness was that British citizens didn't really want to fight this war. They especially didn't want to fight this war when they realized their taxes were going to go up in order to pay for this war. Remember, they just fought the French and Indian War, and they just saw their taxes go up as a result of that war. And lastly, the British had some strategic mistakes early in the war. If the English military leadership had been more familiar with North America, they likely would have been able to win the war fairly easily. Wow, that's a lot of information. How can I put this in an easier way for people to understand? You know, I've heard music is one of the best ways for people to learn. So what should I do? I don't know, maybe some sort of rap battle between an American and an Englishman about the strengths and weaknesses of their army and the motivation for winning the war? Really? That's what we're doing. You know this is going on YouTube, right? Alright, you know what? You asked for it, America. Here we go. It's gonna be cringy. Here we go.
Valentine on the track.
Dearest Britain, I'm sad that it's come to this, but King George's actions have turned us into patriots. We're paying all these taxes with no representation, but now we're going on a permanent vacation. Ugh, the American colonists, most spoiled of them all, they're speaking all kind of nonsense down at Independence Hall. They complain about this, they complain about that, but everyone knows they are just spoiled brats. Just stop. Great Britain has been abusing us for years. The Proclamation Act started giving us tears. We fought a war to keep on moving west, but now King George thinks he knows what's best. Then he passed the tea and the stamp bags. No, we ain't having it. So in Boston 1773, we started boarding this ship. We grabbed all the tea and threw it in the harbor. Britain don't try us because we always go harder. Oh please, stop with the drama. Ask the colonists to contribute and they'll cry to their mamas. In 1763, King George passed a proclamation. It was intended to improve the safety of the nation. Oh, remember that big bad tea act? It made tea cheaper for the colonists. Those are the facts. And your tea party was just criminal behavior. But when you had to pay the money back, you realized it was a failure. So those new laws, they were definitely intolerable, so we had to fight back. It's the only thing that's honorable. Before we got there, we tried to make peace, but King George wouldn't listen. It was outrage in the streets. If a war is what you want, a war is what you'll get. And when it comes to armies, Britain has the best. We have plenty of troops and plenty of supplies. The Continental Army's so sorry, seeing them hurts my eyes. Seriously, y'all army looks so raggedy. You don't need to have boots for the snow. Oh, the agony! And your soldiers have no experience or training. There's really no wonder why you are failing. Yeah, you'll have more troops, but we got more heart. When it comes to North America, we know more about these parts. British people don't even support this war. Stop increasing their taxes and listen to them more. Don't even get me started on your so-called military leaders. And our George Washington, he makes us all believers. And shout out to Von Steuben and Lafayette. Without those two, we'd be depressed. And our biggest advantage is we are fighting to make freedom legal. And you can't compete with the people and our bald eagle. I feel like that's going to be trending, and not a good kind of trending either. Anyways, British General William Howe wanted to invade New York and then take the fight north into Massachusetts, the home of the rebellion. On August 27, 1776, the British and Americans fought in Brooklyn. This ended up being a decisive defeat for the Americans, and General Howe ordered a halt on the British attack. After losing over 1,000 men, Howe expected Washington to surrender. Washington never surrendered, but the British forced the Continental Army out of New York City and into New Jersey, and eventually crossed the Delaware River into Pennsylvania. As you remember, during this time, soldiers didn't have enough food, and some were barely clothed. Many soldiers started to lose hope that they could actually win this war. By the end of 1776, General Howe offered any patriots who signed a statement and promising to be obedient to the king a full pardon, meaning they would not be punished by the British. Thousands of soldiers took him up on that offer. Washington needed to do something to inspire his remaining troops. Washington gathered his troops and read from Thomas Paine's The Crisis. Washington read to his troops, quote, "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from their service of their country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman." Paine is basically saying the summer soldier and the sunshine patriots only support the cause of independence when the war is going well for the patriots. But true patriots, people that will fight for their country no matter what, deserve our love and admiration. Late on December 25th, 1776, Washington's army crossed an icy Delaware River. Because it was late on Christmas night, the Hessians were sleeping off their Christmas feast and were caught by surprise. Washington took 868 men captive without losing a single man that night. This would start to give the Continental Army some hope that they could actually win this war. A week later, they would capture another 300 British troops in Princeton. Along with this surprise attack, Washington also changed his strategy for the war. He knew he had to avoid big battles and instead be defensive and try to tire the British out rather than defeat them. Britain had also come up with a new plan. It was to take over the Hudson River Valley and cut off the New England colonies from the rest of the colonies. After they were able to do that, they would be able to take the fight to New England. When the British arrived in Saratoga Springs in the Hudson River Valley, the Americans were ready and were able to defeat the British in what became known as the Battle of Saratoga. This turned out to be a turning point in this war. When the French heard about this victory, they started to realize that the Americans had a chance to win this war, and the French started to send money, supplies, soldiers, and warships to North America. Later, Spain would also join in and help the Americans. Remember, the French and Spanish viewed themselves as competitors with Great Britain when it came to colonizing area in North America. But the war was far from over. The poorly equipped Americans still had to survive the winter at Valley Forge in 1776. During this winter, many Americans went hungry because farmers preferred to sell their crops to the British, since they would pay in gold instead of the faltering colonial currency. Washington put Baron Friedrich von Steuben, a military officer from Prussia, in charge of turning the Continental Army into a top-notch fighting force. His experience helped bring discipline to the American army. Another foreigner who helped the war effort was Frenchman Marquis de Lafayette. Lafayette wanted to support the American war for independence and risked his own life in support for American independence. He was a wealthy aristocrat, and he started to use his own money to help buy the American soldiers warm clothing. After the winter, the British abandoned Philadelphia and started retreating to New York City. After failing to capture a single northern state, the British adopted a new strategy. Their plan was to take the war to the south. The southern colonies had more loyalists, so the British thought it would be easier to take control of the southern colonies. General Sir Henry Clinton led the British in a successful attack on Savannah, Georgia, and he moved north into the Carolinas thereafter. At that point, Clinton went back to New York City and left Lord Charles Cornwallis to control the war in the south. In the Carolinas, the Americans started to use guerrilla warfare. And no, this has nothing to do with enlisting primates and having them fight some sort of primate war against the British. Guerrilla warfare is a technique that involves hit-and-run raids. The Americans used this technique in the Carolinas because they could avoid a big battle and then run into the swamps and forests after each raid. Getting tired of being ambushed by the Americans, Cornwallis retreated to a peninsula in Virginia called Yorktown. Unfortunately for Cornwallis, he was also walking into a trap. With the help of the French, Washington surrounded Yorktown with 16,000 troops. While that was happening, French warships surrounded Yorktown by the sea to prevent the British Navy from coming in with support. Cornwallis hoped that the British Navy would come in to save him, but when that didn't happen, he was forced to surrender. However, the war didn't officially end in Yorktown. It took King George months to finally accept that British had been defeated. Early in 1783, representatives from the United States and Great Britain went to Paris to sign a peace treaty. This treaty became known as the Treaty of Paris and included three important parts. First, that Great Britain recognized the United States as an independent country. Second, that Great Britain gives up its claim to all land between the Atlantic coast and the Mississippi River, from the border of Canada to Florida. And lastly, the United States agreed to return all rights and property that was taken from Loyalists during the war. Despite this, many Loyalists left the United States to settle in Canada, which was still a British colony at the time. Many African Americans who fought with Britain also settled in Canada rather than return to the United States. Finally, the American Revolution led to the birth of the United States, but also had a big impact on the rest of the world. Soon the French would have their own revolution, where they would try to overthrow the French monarchy. The American Revolution also helped inspire many Latin American countries to revolt against European rule. And that's going to conclude this episode of History of Stevens. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, leave a comment in the comments. Peace!